President Trump is predicting fantastic success on the second day of his second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The two men remain behind closed doors with translators present and the North Korean Foreign Minister, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, an expanded bilateral meeting that is set to produce something in the next several hours before President Trump is wheels up from Vietnam to return to the United States. We're joined by ABC News Nightline anchor Juju Chang. You were in Seoul, a year ago after the first summit in Singapore. It's been a stunning arc in the U.S.-North Korea relationship. How's that being viewed?
Well, the perception back then was one of elation. It was an historic turning point that happened with lightning speed, right? We went from Rocket Man and deranged insults to each other to suddenly making history. The first American president meeting with a leader of North Korea. And as we joked back then, it was as if peace broke out on the Korean Peninsula. And yet a year later, you see a tremendous amount of skepticism, right? Not only are there, reports issued by official bodies saying that North Koreans are cheating, but you look at South Koreans in general, and by extension, the South Korean diaspora around the world, like Korean Americans, who look at it and say, we've been watching 3 generations of this brutal dictatorship family, and they have skirted sanctions, they've broken the rules, they've defied every international norm. So why are we taking them seriously? And then there's also the question of should we take for granted what else is about to be signed, right? There's a lot of talk of a peace declaration, right? Because the Korean War didn't end with a formal peace treaty. So then it raises the question, well, what do you replace that with? What kind of non-aggression pact or what kind of treaty will come in? But in the meantime, if you look at where South Korea is now, after the war, South Korea was a basket case. It was one of the poorest economies in the world. Now it's the 11th largest economy, and it dwarfs North Korea. The annual income of a South Korean is like $38,000 a year versus North Korea, which is $1,700. I mean, you talk about defectors coming to the South, and they are on average 3 inches shorter because of the starvation that has been pervasive.
You've talked to some of those defectors. I wonder how they must be viewing what is going on.
The idea of human rights has been largely absent from the negotiating table, both on this summit, but also the inter-Korean summits as well. And so there's a lot of heartache among the defector community because they will tell you stories that will make your hair stand on end. They talk about their families being imprisoned, executed, tortured, raped, just for fleeing or just for watching a Western broadcast, for crimes against the state, thought crimes, right? So this is an incredibly brutal dictator who has been known to assassinate close rivals, not to mention the opposition, and yet there's a lot of optimism at the end of the day because they want a peace declaration. They want stability. But if you look at the approval rating of the South Korean president, Moon Jae-in came in, and a year ago with this summit, his approval rating was 80%, right? A historic high. No one had ever seen anything like it. And yet now, if you look at it, it's dipped below 50%. And a lot of that is based on the domestic economy and this idea that, okay, what have you done for me lately? And where is this really going to go?
Not unlike Americans in that regard, then.
Exactly right. And also, if you think about what a peace declaration means for South Americans, and again, by extension, Korean Americans in general, it's not South Americans, but South Koreans, sure. It implies that there would be a drawdown of U.S. troops, right? We know 30,000 American troops stationed in South Korea. And what kind of a destabilizing effect that might be if we put too much trust into a dictator that they've never really trusted.
And the president has already said that taking troops out is, at least for now, off the table, although I guess you never know what's going on behind closed doors.
You never know, because at the end of the last summit in June, President Trump suddenly announced the cessation of exercises, joint military exercises between the U.S. and South Korea. That was a big give to North Korea, and it took his own advisors by surprise, as well as the South Korean government. So there's this fear that, what's he going to do? He always talks about drawdown of troops. South Korea is costing us X billion of dollars. But, South Korea also sees itself and sees, by extension, the North Korean leader as something of a crazy uncle, right? That they didn't really take seriously. When I would travel around South Korea, they'd be like, oh, you Americans, you take Kim Jong-un too seriously. Like, we think of him as a buffoon, as that's what South Koreans would tell me. They'd also say that, like, come on, the K-pop industry alone is a $5 billion, industry. We are a cultural export of South Korean soap operas. We are, between Samsung and Hyundai, a global power, the 11th largest economy in the world. And North Korea is an economic backwater. And so, on some level, the only thing that gives them power, North Korea, is the nuclear warheads and the ICBM technologies. And so the real thinking among people in realpolitik and in arms control is, why would he give that up? And the idea of denuclearization is really something that's up in the air.
Juju, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you.
ABC News Nightline anchor Juju Chang with us as we await some result from this expanded bilateral meeting between President Trump and North Korea's Kim Jong-un.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.